Hey guys, what's going on? It's Eli, back with another review video, and yes, one more Christmassy material for me to review on the weekends. And to wrap up this month/December, and just like what I did with Season 1, that's right, because you read the title, I'm reviewing Season 2 of The Santa Clauses. Yes, Season 2 of The Santa Clauses. First, a recap on Season 1. I thought Season 1 of The Santa Clauses was really good, and of course I did a review on it, and if you guys want to go check that out, go check it out before you watch this. I understand that Season 1 was not, really the best, and it was kind of a bad start for The Santa Clauses, but overall, still, I think it was pretty good. It did its best, But, it wasn't long after Season 1 wrapped because, at first, they said it was going to be a mini-series, but it didn't take too long for there to be an announcement that there would be a Season 2. And, yep, had to wait another whole year for Season 2, and thus, we finally have Season 2. And I, of course, as of this recording, watched Season 2 fully, and I waited and watched it, when all the episodes were out, all 6 episodes, kind of binge watching, you know what I'm saying? And I gotta say, Season 2, I think was actually another pretty good season. And I think I have read that a lot of people have said that Season 2 was probably better than Season 1, and that's their opinion. But like I said, I thought, and I'm sure I can't be the only one that thinks that Season 1 was pretty good. So yeah, what Season 2 had in store? Oh boy, let me tell you. This was pretty interesting for what was going on in Season 2, let me tell you. We, of course, have our returning cast of characters from Tim Allen, once again playing Scott Calvin / Santa Claus, Elizabeth Mitchell, once again playing Carol Calvin / Mrs. Claus, their 2 kids, Cal, once again played by Austin Kane, Sandra, once again played by Elizabeth Allen Dick, Tim Allen's real-life daughter, and the elf characters, Noel, once again played by Devin Bright, Betty, once again played by Matilda Lawyer, yeah, and which, Noel and Betty, they're actually a couple, an elf couple, I think, yeah, husband and wife, yeah. And Gary, the one elf with the eye patch, once again played by Liam Kyle, and a couple other elf characters, like there was, I think, yeah, Crouton, I think I'm saying that right, played by Sasha Knight, and there was also, let me see, I think, yeah, her, Eddie, once again played by Isabella Bennett. So yeah, and a couple of other familiar faces that we saw in Season 1 and have come back for Season 2. There's that, Christmassy, winterish witch, yeah. La Befana, once again played by Laura San Giacomo. I think I got that right. And also, Cal's girlfriend, Riley, once again played by Ruby J. So basically what happens in Season 2, well, because once again, trouble awaits for the North Pole, the elves, and of course Santa and his family, when a past Santa returns, Magnus Antus, I think I got that right, played by Eric Stonestreet, who is probably best known for being one of the cast members of Modern Family. So he has come back, and it's really cool because we get a lot of backstory, and basically Magnus Antus, who was, I believe, the first Santa Claus, this took place 7 centuries ago when he was Santa, and he was really not being a jolly old Saint Nick. and the elves label him / call him Bad Santa. Yeah, bad Santa, mean Santa, scary Santa, etc. And apparently, and this was interesting, not only were there elves, working alongside with Magnus Antis, there was also gnomes. So that's interesting, that there were gnomes, and because I don't know, because gnomes and elves, like I guess they're kind of the same, I'm pretty sure. And one of the main gnome characters, and that's with mean Santa, bad Santa. So AKA the Mad Santa. My mistake. Because I'm looking at on the IMDb page. Magnus Antis, AKA the Mad Santa. So that's what the elves call him. So alongside with him is one of the main gnome characters, Olga, played by Marta Kessler. I think I got that right. Olga, is pretty interesting because, she literally has a unibrow, okay, and very feisty, for how she acts. And so, basically, about Magnus, he was imprisoned, technically, turned into a nutcracker, and he had been a nutcracker for 7 centuries. Again, 7 centuries. And in the real world, there's this, Christmas theme park called Santaopolis, I'm pretty sure if I'm saying that right. And the main guy who runs Santaopolis is a guy named Kris Kringle. Literally, his name is Kris Kringle, played by Gabriel Iglesias, I don't even know if I'm saying his last name right, but if you know who I'm talking about, yeah, him. So he plays Kris Kringle, and again, he runs Santopolis that, he and his father had worked, and, they created this place, mostly his dad, and, Kris is helping out his dad run the place. And back at the North Pole, Scott, aka Santa, wants to start a family business of Christmas. He puts his daughter, Sandra, in charge of all of the animals in the North Pole and, of course, the reindeer, because she has the capability of, talking and understanding animals and, of course, the reindeer. For Carol, he puts her in charge of running the ELFS, which of course, stands for elves, division in the North Pole, I guess you could say. And as for Cal, Scott wants his son to be the next Santa, having his son be trained to be the next Santa, to take his father's place. And yeah, something about Scott just really in pushing his son to be the next Santa, and how this kind of tears apart, him and Riley, and of course I'm referring to Cal, for a little while, and it's a bit of a shame, they had to do that, but until I get to that, because speaking of Riley, because in episode 1, and yeah, the episodes of Season 2. Episode 1, The Cribble Crabble Claws. Episode 2, Floofy. Episode 3, No Magic at the Dinner Table. Episode 4, Miracle on Dead Creek Road. Episode 5, Betty, which, of course, that's Betty. Which, yeah, Betty being one of the main elf characters. And Episode 6, Wanga Bonga Longa. Yeah, that's an episode title for you. So back to Riley, because in episode 1, it's Cal's 18th birthday, and, blowing out the candles and making a wish, and his wish is to be with his girlfriend here in the North Pole. When he blows out the candles, she magically appears, and she was brushing her teeth, and yeah, she's in the North Pole. And how Scott, at first, how he feels over, Cal, and with his girlfriend and such. I mean, come on, Scott should be happy, and I think Carol is, but it's Scott lets the family business and the whole thing of being Santa and all this get to him, You know, like what was supposed to happen in season 1, but Cal didn't do it. He was supposed to, you know, pour dust on Riley for her to forget everything that, you know, about Cal and, you know, his dad being Santa, but Cal, he didn't do it, and thus she knows. And Cal and Riley being a cute couple, and at one point, because they give them each other, like, a romantic nickname, Floofy. And yeah, one of the episode titles being called Floofy. That's funny. And Riley, she fully supports Cal being trained to become the next Santa and so on. But not only that, Betty has to go on a cribble crapple, which is that's what happened with Bernard, because he had to do the cribble crabble, basically leave the North Pole and be in the real world for 1 whole year. And the fact that Bernard never returned from doing the cribble crabble. And the same thing with Curtis. Does anybody remember Curtis from the Santa Claus sequels? That's what happened with Curtis, too. He did the cribble crabble, and basically that's what elves need to do. They need to do the cribble crabble. Like, that's in the elf rules, North Pole rules, and so on. And yeah, because both Bernard and Curtis, they never returned from that. And it's nice to see that we finally, and they explain and establish what happened not only to Bernard, but to Curtis. Because, yeah, in season 1, he was totally absent, and new head elves taking over and being in charge of the North Pole and everything. So it's nice that they do mention Curtis and his whereabouts, yeah. So again, Betty has to do the cribble crabble, and yeah, because she's going to be away from the North Pole for 1 whole year, being, you know, traveling around the real world, and basically both her and Noel will be separated for a while, and thus Noel is left in charge being the main head elf, and Betty telling Scott not to make any changes or do anything, like, stupid, kind of, not, you know, just not to really use the word stupid, but, you know, still. And once she leaves, Scott basically disobeys, and he just starts doing some things that are not looking too good. It's pretty funny. And again, because, you know, placing Sandra in charge of looking after all the animals in the North Pole, Carol taking over the ELFS, you know, which of course stands for elves, again, a division in the North Pole, and yeah, Cal being trained as the new Santa. And Cal being trained as the new Santa not going so well, and the fact that Cal has fear of heights, you know, and being on the sleigh, and he would pass out, it's funny. And also, because, like, at one point, Sandra is talking to 2 of the reindeers, and, which are, Blitzer and, yeah, it's Blitzer, but, okay, trying to find it. Okay, yeah, Blitzer and Blitzen. Did I say Blitzer? Sorry, Blitzen and Donner. And I didn't know it was them voicing Donner and Blitzen. Donner was voiced by Neil Flynn, and Blitzen was voiced by Jack McBrayer. Like, how did I not know it was them, especially Jack McBrayer? Like, Jack McBrayer definitely has a very clearly recognizable voice, you know what I mean? Just, oh my gosh, I swear, I had no idea it was them. But it was nice for them to, like, have cameo voices as the reindeer. It was pretty funny, and the interactions they have with Sandra is pretty funny. Also, just like what season 1 did, because we got a couple of returning familiar faces like Charlie and Bernard, in season 2, because at one point, the legendary figures are not so sure, and I guess you could say they're nervous about Scott's son being trained as the new Santa, and checking in on Santa, and, you know, if everything's going so well, and if Cal has got this. And we get 2 familiar faces of the legendary figures. Cupid, once again played by Kevin Pollak, and Sandman, played by Michael Dorn. It was good to see them, and when I reacted to the trailer, I was excited to see them, yeah. And especially because, you know, for Kevin Pollak and Michael Dorn, especially Michael Dorn, like, I was hoping, and for Season 1, if I did or did not establish this in my review of Season 1, again, go check it out, it seemed obvious, and they would have easily come back. The legendary figures. Not even Mother Nature came back, which, that was a bit of a shame. What's-her-face who played Mother Nature, she could have easily come back. But, yeah, and with the exceptions of the two actors, what's their names that played Tooth Fairy and the Easter Bunny, because, you know, both of them sadly passed away. However, we do see the Easter Bunny at one point in Season 2, because at one point, because coming back to, you know, Bad Santa, you know, that's his nickname, because he has awakened from being a nutcracker thanks to Chris, because there was one scene where Chris and his dad were, you know, didn't have a pretty good conversation because Chris's dad was telling him to start, you know, he needs to grow up and so on. And Chris had one of those magical snow globes, and like what we saw at the end of Season 1, you know, the magic snow globes would show someone their Christmas past and happy Christmas past memories. At one point, it accidentally fell and it broke, and the magic in it, well, it made its way to the Nutcracker of Mangus Antis, and that basically brought him back from no longer being a nutcracker, and along with him was Olga. Yeah, I'm saying that right. So basically, she was behind Mangus's back the whole time. She was the one surviving gnome. Well, I mean, all the other gnomes who we would see in the last episode, they're all right, and they were waiting for a long time to do something, you know, to take vengeance on, you know, the elves, basically. So Mangus and Olga, they trick Chris into thinking that Mangus is the good Santa and so on, and Mangus helps out with the Santopolis that's at this point not doing so good, and very soon Chris's dad is going to be selling it to somebody. But yeah, Mangus, he makes some adjustments and uses his magic to make Santopolis much better and happy and a fun experience, you know, you know, taking advantage of Chris, and, you know, Mangus and Olga planning to take back the North Pole, and the fact that Mangus despises how humans are, how we humans act and so on, even to this day, and what he experiences in modern time, yeah. And at one point, and coming back to the legendary figures, and, you know, since I mentioned the Easter Bunny, well, now I come to the Easter Bunny, because at one point, Olga captured the Easter Bunny, and forcing him to help Olga and Mangus to get back to the North Pole, and, you know, by doing so, just torturing him to eat all the peeps that they give him, yellow peeps. And the Easter Bunny in this is played by Tracy Morgan. Yeah, Tracy Morgan, like, it's Tracy Morgan. Like, he's a nice guy and a pretty funny guy / actor, and you know what? He was pretty good as the Easter Bunny. And for some reason, like, this Easter Bunny, he knew Mangus, you know, 17 centuries ago, and, yeah, because it's a bit confusing. Like, did the Easter Bunny played by Tracy Morgan retire at one point? Because the Easter Bunny that we see in the Santa Claus sequels, well, it's a completely different Easter Bunny, if you get what I'm saying. And I think it's totally obvious. That's one big question I have. Like, when did this Easter Bunny played by Tracy Morgan, like, you know what I mean. I don't know. Maybe there is an explanation, but who knows? I really don't know. But it's really obvious. But yeah, so Eventually, I think, yeah, because the Easter Bunny did escape, and he went to warn Santa slash Scott about Mangus Antis. And that's the thing, because throughout the first few couple of episodes, Scott and, his family have no idea who this Mangus is, aka the Mad Santa, but the elves are well aware, and they try to hide it from Scott for a little while. Even at one point, in a secret vault, there was the Nutcracker of Mangus. Mangus, who was turned and imprisoned as a Nutcracker, but it disappeared, and yep, it made its way into Santopolis with Chris, thanks to Gary, because Gary, I think, it's explained and established that Gary sold Mangus, imprisoned as a Nutcracker because something that Gary did of gambling. That's why. Oh, Gary. And also, Sandra, she discovers that she has powerful magic, and it only really happens when she's mad. And yeah, she discovers it, and her brother Cal is a witness, and she's not sure, to tell her parents about this yet. And she starts coming to the Winter Witch, basically, La Bafina. La Bafina will only help and train Sandra if Sandra tells her parents, but she's nervous and she's not sure how they're going to react and so on. And she kind of, in a way, mentions it, not really, but still tricking La Bafina to still help and train her. I think, yeah, because even La Bafina realizes this. It doesn't take her too long to know that Sandra really didn't tell them. But yeah, sure enough, Sandra does tell both her parents, and, well, Scott, for one thing, is not mad or anything like that. Besides, them living in the North Pole and the Calvins / the Clauses, they all have magic, and they're very powerful. So what's wrong with that? And thus, yeah, she is seeing La Bafina a lot more, and, because La Bafina is helping Sandra with, her magic and such. And for a little while, Carol / Mrs. Claus was, for some weird reason, I don't know, I didn't find it weird, but I'm just saying, kind of strange of her that she was jealous, because I guess, she was thinking that La Bafina was being, a pretty good, I want to say, aunt or mother to her daughter, but it doesn't last that long, and even La Bafina assures Carol and so on, so everything's patched up and such. But still, later on, because, moments between Carol and her daughter, really good, and they really start to bond as mother and daughter. And also, for Cal and Scott, father and son time, and, Scott really trying to, train his son to be the next Santa, and it's still not going too well. And even at one point, because, yeah, did they have to do this? Did they have to pull this? Did they have to pull this on us? If I'm saying it correctly. Because at one point, well, Cal missing his girlfriend, Riley, and trying to message her, and yet trying to message her from the North Pole, even at one point, trying to be there, because it's her birthday coming up, and when he surprised her at her house, it's late at night, he showed up in the middle of the night and, wishing her happy birthday. Well, Riley is a bit upset and angry, I want to say. And the fact that he showed up 2 days after her birthday, that was 2 days ago. And sadly, Riley, breaks it off between both of them. It's, she feels that it's not working, and especially, how she feels that, with what Cal is doing, being trained to become the next Santa, it's tearing them apart, stuff like that, you know what I mean? And yeah, this upsets Cal, and Riley tells Cal that, he might as well, dust her and have her forget every bit of memory of him and so on, but, he just can't do it because he loves her so much to do so. And and then Riley telling Cal that she'll just forget about him on her own and so on. It's really sad, and yeah, this tears Cal apart. And yeah, of course, yeah, this was Scott's doing. He wasn't thinking straight at first, but until, like, near the end of the show, and until I get to that. And more on, like, Cal being trained as Santa, and with the legendary figures, because, like I said, the Easter Bunny, at one point, he escaped from Mangus and Ogla, and he went to the North Pole to warn Santa, and he ran into Sandra and Cal, and, yeah, so they met the Easter Bunny, and Cal and Sandra, they got into a little argument about, calling the Easter Bunny a rabbit and stuff like that, and Sandra correcting her brother, and by doing so, she gets angry, and unleashing magic, and this causes the Easter Bunny to turn into a bunny, and La Bafina showing up and taking the Easter Bunny, now turned into a, ordinary-looking rabbit, to try and turn him back into his regular self. And, things get out of hand, I think that's the word I'm looking for, between Bafina and Sandra. And both upset with each other, especially Bafina upset with Sandra, and with the legendary figures, because, yeah, the Easter Bunny failed to warn Santa about Mangus, while the elves, they are still keeping that top secret from the Calvins / the Clauses about Mangus, aka Mad Santa. Sandman. Okay, now come to Sandman, and as I mentioned, Michael Dorn once again reprising the role of Sandman, coming in and, checking on how the whole thing of Cal being trained as the next Santa is going. It was pretty funny, and Michael Dorn being Michael Dorn, of course. Michael Dorn never disappoints, and especially his performance as Sandman. So again, Sandman coming in, and at one point, he pretends to be the kid, or whoever that's asleep, and when, Cal, as the new Santa, coming in and, giving gifts and such, the best I can describe. And it's pretty funny, and of course, like, what comes out of the magical sack? Well, things that go so well with Sandman, like a blanket, a teddy bear, and whatever the heck that thing was called, like, smells good. I can't remember the name of it. It's pretty funny. But things change pretty quick because, well, after what happened with the Easter Bunny, the Clauses and the elves, they have to do Easter this year. Yeah, and I think it was pretty funny that they have to do Easter, and the fact that they have to dress up kind of like the Easter Bunny, like, Easter rabbits, technically. And a couple of elves give Santa a device where he can transform into, not being Santa, to regular Scott Calvin, no beard and anything like that. And I was wondering, and yeah, because when that happened, I was like, okay, good, because it wouldn't be the same. Anything that has to do with the Santa Claus, like the movies and the show, it wouldn't be the same without having, Tim Allen not in the Santa makeup, you know what I mean? Like, yeah, and it was nice to once again see Tim Allen out of the Santa makeup and gear for season 2. And you know what? It makes sense because of having that device if he ever wants to, turn back into his regular self or go back to being Santa. So again, it's pretty funny them taking over Easter this year, and even like they turn themselves invisible when they're in the houses, and even like using some like Easter eggs that will explode and I guess knock somebody out, I guess if they're seen and exposed. I think that's what they're for. And Cal, like, because this was on Cal, the eggs were switched, the regular eggs were accidentally switched with the eggs that explode, and they have to go back, at one point they have to go back to most of the houses where they dropped off the eggs, but they still accomplished what they were doing. Even Carol and Sandra still, like, mother and daughter bonding time, and how they're at the Easter Bunny's house, and they at one point are wrecking some stuff in the house. I mean, they're looking for something, obviously, in the house. And, yeah, that's where they really start to bond, and just letting their anger out, because, you know, that's, you know, and with Sandra and her powers. Yeah, because Carol discovered, too, that, you know, Sandra has powerful magic. Okay, and to speed things up a little, Sandman, and this was before Scott and Cal went to deliver Easter eggs and such to the real world. Sandman, he did at one point wake up and he saw that Cal was dressed up as an Easter bunny, and Scott explains to him that, you know, because Cal is hopefully going to be the next Santa, he needs to really know the importance of doing this, and by, you know, doing other holidays, because kind of the same thing, like Easter and Christmas, you know, at night, the Easter Bunny and Santa, as well as, like, say, the Tooth Fairy, traveling at night, delivering, you know, like, eggs, presents, and, you know, the Tooth Fairy delivering a coin and taking your tooth, that kind of stuff. And Sandman is, yeah, he gets the message, he understands, he's following Scott's trick, and, you know, he gets upset that Cal is not being trained for Sandman's job/division, you know? It's pretty funny. And before Sandman left, he told them that, you know, he'll get his, like, lawyer or something to help Cal with this. It was pretty funny. And it was nice to see Michael Dorn once again reprising the role of Sandman, but also more with Cupid, because didn't talk about Cupid that much. Cupid's appearance, and Cupid showed up before Sandman did in an early episode, and yeah, Cupid, like, explaining that, you know, him and the other legendary figures, how they've reacted to the whole thing of Cal being trained as the next Santa, and how Cal and Riley, they meet and interact with Cupid, especially Riley, because treating Cupid like a baby, you know, oh yeah, peekaboo, and starts doing peekaboo, and Cupid then starts, like, finding this delightful, and so on. Oh, Cupid. So yeah, it was, you know, again, it was nice to see Cupid and Sandman, and, you know, with the Easter Bunny you know, this time being played by Tracy Morgan. Yeah, it was nice that, you know, we did finally get to see the legendary figures appear in the Santa Clauses. There's still a couple of other characters we have not seen yet, but who knows? So, you know, and so also, yeah, so with the whole thing of them helping out and, you know, doing Easter, well, like, yeah, because it seems like it went pretty well. But back in the real world, because Mangus, at times, senses, like, the presence of the sleigh, and Scott, a little bit later, starts having visions of seeing Mangus, and he doesn't really know that it's Mangus and who he is. And, yeah, and to speed things up some more, we see Betty at times in the real world, because of the whole Cribble Crabble, like, you know, she's in Manhattan eating a slice of pizza, and she does discover very later on that Mangus has been unleashed. Yeah, and of course this brings her back to the North Pole to help out, even though she's on the Cribble Crabble thing. But while Betty was away, Noel had a, like, cardboard cutout headpiece of his wife, like, as if she was present, and, like, sometimes turning to the cardboard cutout headpiece face of his elf wife. It was pretty funny. And coming back to Santopolis, yeah, because what else is happening in Santopolis? Well, still, because Mangus and Ogla still planning their plots to, you know, try to get back to the North Pole and so on. But also, because, yeah, Santopolis, thanks to Mangus, you know, Santopolis much better and, you know, really fun experience for everybody. In fact, there's, like, a show, like, that's happening on a stage that, you know, that we see is pretty funny, and Mangus performing, and, you know, like exposing magic and stuff like that. Like, I mean, even the elves at the North Pole detected that Christmas magic was being used in front of people, being exposed and so on. And yeah, because of course them knowing that it's Mangus. And yeah, there is one moment, and we get more of, the backstory / origins of the elves, and, when Mangus was the main Santa at the time, 7 centuries ago. And if I said decades, decades, centuries, Betty, who has returned temporarily from the Cribble Crabble, gives Scott and Carol the complete backstory of, when the elves served under Mangus, and Bernard is mentioned, and the fact that Bernard and all the other elves knew that Mangus was not doing a really good job as being Santa, and the elves, slowly but surely, they were doing this behind Mangus's back, they were going to turn against Mangus, and the gnomes had Mangus's back the whole time, and so it was war against the elves and the gnomes, and we even see Gary, because some of the elves from Betty, Noel, and actually that's where Noel and Betty first met, was 7 centuries ago. And there was Gary, and there was Isabella, and they were there from the beginning, and them and all the other elves against Mangus. And we do see Gary before he had an eye patch, and I was wondering if we were actually going to see that, how he got the eye patch, but we don't, and we're left to guess and assume. And I think we can tell, because how he lost his eye, obviously, from the battle between the gnomes and the elves. Yeah. And to speed things up on, Betty giving the Calvins the backstory, because eventually, of course, they defeated Mangus, even when, say, Labafina was there as well, her and the other legendary figures, and the fact that Labafina used to be a legendary figure, and even the Santa Claus 3, the Escape Clause, established this, that Mother Nature established that powers can't work on other legendary figures. In other words, powers from legendary figures, they can't use them on other legendary figures. If to fight them and so on. You get my point. So with them repeating that in Season 2, it's nice to see. And the fact that Labafina, because she used to be a legendary figure, she actually resigned and stepped down from being a legendary figure, and in order to help take on Mangus. And she basically, at one point, left the elves with a bag of a lot of powers that she got from Sandman, Cupid, and the Easter Bunny in order to defeat Mangus and the gnomes. And yeah, they, of course, successfully defeat him, and thanks to Labafina, by turning him into a nutcracker for a long time, and even Ogla, because she got in the middle of it too, behind his back, and yeah, so she was also a nutcracker. I mean, technically, we never saw her behind him. What would she have looked like as a nutcracker on his back? I don't know, and I don't know, because probably just a nutcracker on a nutcracker's back, basically. Okay, that's the best I can describe and say. But yeah, and because Betty told the Calvins the backstory of Mangus, well, by doing so, she thinks and is prepared to, be fired and stuff like that. But no, because that's not what happens. The Calvins, they understand, and what the elves did by defeating Mangus, they became heroes. They saved the day, and what would come next for the elves, and the next Santa Clauses, and as we would see in an episode of Season 1, where we see a bunch of other past Santa Clauses, including Krampus, yeah, in that episode, and where Bernard appeared. So that was pretty funny. And again, it was nice that they mentioned Bernard and the fact that, he left too, and, he too was against Mangus Atnus, aka Mad Santa. And at one point, Cal feels pretty bad, and feels that, he's disappointed his old man, Scott. And for a while, he was wearing like a Santa training vest, jacket, whatever. And he at one point accidentally left it behind, like it just came off of him, stuff like that, even when, they got back on the sleigh and they went back home. And Cal, feeling unresponsible, well, he takes his father's sleigh and Blitzen and Donner to retrieve the vest/coat, the training vest/coat, I should say, because he too starts to have visions of Mangus having the vest/coat. The training, yeah. And when he arrives there, well, he meets Chris at Santopolis, and Cal being Cal, because he finds Santopolis cool, and Cal comes face to face with both Mangus and Olga, and Chris at that point starts to see that things are getting out of hand. He even tried to call 911, and yeah, not a good idea to call 911, as they would believe him, and he was hung up. And what happened next, Olga and, Mangus as well, they duct taped both Chris and Cal to the wall. Even at one point, Mangus turned Cal into a freaking nutcracker. Oh my gosh. And Chris, he at one point passed out. That was pretty funny. And yeah, of course, Scott and Carol, they are aware of where Cal is and what he did, especially thanks to Cal's sister, Sandra. She finds out where Cal is and alerts her parents. And so Carol and Scott, they travel to Santopolis by this time using, like, the mail check-in room where... it's really cool, because how letters go to the North Pole, well, whenever someone puts a letter in a mailbox that, it's to the North Pole, it would magically disappear and make its way to the North Pole, to Santa's workshop. That's pretty neat there. And yeah, because even at one point, Olga and Mangus, they wrote a letter to the North Pole, sending a message, obviously, to the Calvins / the Clauses. So, again, Scott and Carol, they use that to write a letter to the real world, and that would magically transport them, to the real world. And sure enough, they arrive at Santopolis. While back at the North Pole, they leave Sandra, Labafina, and the elves to take care and protect the North Pole in case Mangus and Olga make their way there. And that's the thing, because a little bit early, Mangus got a hold of the actual sleigh, thanks to Cal, because Cal brought the sleigh, and they did encounter Mangus early in one of the, last few episodes, Cal, Scott, and Carol, and they, of course, escaped. And with Cal coming back to the real world to retrieve the training jacket slash coat, and yeah, because that's where he accidentally left it behind. So they help and save Cal and Chris from being duct taped, and Carol is very upset that her son, her baby boy, is turned into a nutcracker, and she's just telling Scott to turn him back now, and so on. But he doesn't have the magic right now to do so, because there was at one point where Scott was losing his Christmas magic, and by using his nose, as we've seen before with other Santas, by using his nose and boom, magic, Christmas magic would happen. And Chris finally meeting the Santa Claus, the main Santa Claus, which being Scott, and Mrs. Claus, and interesting enough, we get a flashback of Chris as a boy and him seeing Scott as Santa, delivering presents in his house. And actually, in the flashback, it takes place in the first Santa Claus film. And that one scene where Scott is, getting a kayak out of the magic sack. Yeah, that was Chris at that house. Wow, talk about a good connection right there. And another pretty good connection that we're going to get to that's very important and that has to do with magic. Christmas magic, that is. So, yeah, Chris meeting Scott slash Santa, and what he said to Carol slash Mrs. Claus was funny, saying to her that, he had a huge crush on her for a long time. Oh, Chris. And Chris helps out, of course, Scott and Carol, and yeah, because, he tells them that, he was tricked by Mangus and Olga for, because he, for him to think that he was the Santa, Mangus. And Chris offers them using a sleigh and plastic reindeer. And actually, what happens is that Scott uses Christmas magic, that what he has right now, to make the plastic reindeer come to life. That's pretty cool. And, well, they easily use the sleigh, and Chris tagging along. And what happens next at the North Pole? Mangus and Olga, they finally arrive at the North Pole. Olga summons the other gnomes by, using a horn. And with Betty, of course, being there. And actually, at one point, Betty was upset to see, her hubby, talking to the cardboard cutout headpiece of her. It was pretty funny. But it's still her, but, Betty comes face to face with Olga. They have a fight, the weapon that Olga has that Mangus gave to Olga to fight off against Betty, and Betty has a toy sword. But she uses it like a boss. Yeah, go Betty. And a confrontation between Scott and Mangus, even a couple of times, holding the Nutcracker of Cal in the form of a Nutcracker hostage a couple of times. And at one point, Carol and Sandra, they start talking about an amulet. And an amulet, and this has to do with the fact that Sandra got powerful Christmas magic, and this had to do with Mangus, with this amulet, the best I can describe. And we soon find out what this amulet is. And at one point, because Scott and Mangus, they're just talking it out, and we see the rest of the gnomes come in, and actually what happens is that, well, Mangus orders them to attack Santa, but no, the gnomes, they're on Santa's side, Scott Calvin's side, thanks to Null. Null convinced and gave a speech to the gnomes where they were in the North Pole, convincing them, to, be good gnomes, and, they don't have to be at each other's throats, the gnomes and the elves. And, because throughout Season 2, Noel at times didn't feel like he had what it takes to be a head elf while his wifey was away because of Cribble Crabble. But that was the moment for him that, he does have what it takes to be head elf. He was brave enough to make peace and negotiations with the gnomes, and it worked. So everybody against Mangus, and he still has Cal as a Nutcracker hostage, but with the amulet, we find out that metal mug, cup, whatever, that we see Santa at times drinking, and any other character that we see, and we get flashbacks from the first movie and, clips from Season 1 where everybody was drinking from the metal cup/mug. It's the amulet! That's what gives them Christmas power/magic. And with Sandra having powerful Christmas magic. And by doing so, well, transforming Cal back into his normal self. That was the moment for Sandra. She did it. It seemed it was impossible, and it would take a while to transform someone back into their normal self. That goes for the Easter Bunny, when he was accidentally transformed into a regular, cute, rabbit/bunny. But, yeah, it was nice to see what happened, and, Sandra saving and turning back her big brother to his normal self. It was pretty good. And, because a couple of things that Mangus said to Scott, and, about Cal, Mangus did have a point, because I think, and the best I can put at it is, Scott was really thinking more about, the family business and the whole thing of his son being Santa, and didn't really, for once, think about what mattered to his son, and if his son really wanted this, to be the next Santa. What Cal really wanted was to be with his girlfriend and to, probably, go to college and to experience the real world, that stuff right there. And it was nice that Mangus and Olga, they were redeemed, and especially with Betty and Olga, because they're at one point in the main room of the North Pole, the workshop and such, and Betty showing Olga that she can build toys of her own, and it was pretty funny, some of the toys that they built. And Mangus, well, he actually at one point imprisoned himself, and apparently so did Chris. Why? I mean, it's understandable with Chris, but he he imprisoned himself. Okay. And Mangus, it doesn't take too long for him to join Chris into running Santopolis and having 50% of, running and taking care of Santopolis. That's the best I can put at it. And the epilogue, because, well, everything is going well now at the North Pole, and what happens is they bring a prom to Cal in the North Pole, and we see Riley. She's there, and obviously Scott talked with Riley and assured her and so on, and and she even said, and it was funny, how can she not disagree and argue with the Santa Claus? And Scott, because another thing about Scott is he was afraid and worried to let his son go. But he realizes that, what? Cal will be perfectly fine, being with Riley and probably going to a college, and if Cal were to consider being the next Santa. And once again, Cal and Riley being romantic and so on, and having the prom at the North Pole. And even Mangus and Olga, they're there. So is Chris. Chris is having a fun time being in the North Pole. And when he first showed up and dancing with elves. And by the way, because some of the other elf characters, because we see some elf characters dancing and singing. Even early on in season 2, they did a commercial advertising for if any elves would like to work at Santa's workshop. That kind of advertisement. It was pretty funny. For Olga, she wants to remain in the North Pole, and, she really doesn't want to be a part of, what Mangus and Chris are going to do at Santopolis. It's pretty funny. But things have patched up between Olga and Mangus. There were times where they kind of bickered at each other. You know what I mean? Yeah, that kind of stuff. And for Betty, well, she has to go back doing the Cribble Crabble thing, but she's not alone this time. Her hubby, Noel, joins with her, and even Scott, decided to allow and have Noel join Betty do the Cribble Crabble, and besides, it's mentioned a little bit early in season 2 that their honeymoon was long overdue, and now was the perfect opportunity for them to have their honeymoon during Cribble Crabble. And even at one point, Carol gets emotional because she's going to miss both Noel and Betty. Because, again, elves doing the Cribble Crabble for one whole year, and then they would come back to the North Pole. So Noel and Betty, they go off doing the Cribble Crabble, and they're also on their honeymoon, finally. And we then come to, I think, 7 months later? Yeah. And we see at Santopolis, Chris and Mangus, they're putting on a musical performance, singing Santa Claus is coming to town. They're singing that song. Even the Scotts, Scott and the rest of his family, I should say, they attended, and that was nice of them to attend. And even some lady down below, in the seats, asked them what they're supposed to be. And Carol replied saying, we're the protectors of the North Pole / Christmas, however she said it. And they have to, get back riding on the sleigh because it's Christmas. And so they leave, and everything's going so well at Santopolis for Mangus and Chris. And we see Betty and Noel in Manhattan eating pizza, because, you know, if I hadn't mentioned this already, we did see in one of the early episodes that Betty was eating a slice of pizza. So it's nice to see that both Betty and Noel, they're together and having their honeymoon during the Cribble Crabble. And they do hear Santa going, ho, 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 and the one last shot we get is, well, we see them riding the sleigh, and this was pretty nice. And this was a breaking the fourth wall moment where Scott/Santa looks directly at the camera and wishes us a Merry Christmas. That was pretty nice. That was nice. And yeah, and when I watched that, the final episode, and when it came up to that, I said, thank you, Tim, because why not, you know? It was pretty good. And that was a nice way to end Season 2 right there. Just like how Season 1 ended, and how Season 2 ended, you know? Because the story for Season 1 had came to an end, and the story for Season 2 had came to an end, if you get what I'm saying. The Santa Clauses Season 2... Wow, what a great season this was. I really enjoyed it, and like I said, I enjoyed the first season. But yeah, Season 2, I can't deny, it was probably much better than Season 1, just saying. The story and what was going on in Season 2 was pretty good and interesting. The cast of characters, some that came back, and, you know, some new faces, they were all pretty good. And again, seeing some of the legendary figures, you know, a Santa that, you know, once went mad and then became good, and, you know, seeing gnomes and, you know, the relationship between Cal and Riley, you know, the funny moments that Season 2 had, the emotional moments. And there was one funny moment, I can't forget to mention this, because there was one point where, because Scott was, you know, back as his regular self, and the watch at one point was destroyed. Well, he did slowly but surely turn back into Santa, and he, for a little while, only had the mustache and I think the goatee, whatever, and the eyebrows, yeah, just those. And Betty commented on Scott, saying that he looks like if Colonel Sanders and the Monopoly guy had a child. Okay, that was pretty funny. Yeah, just everything about Season 2 was pretty good and well done. Yeah, I think, yeah, they did a really good job with what Season 2 had in store. And I'm giving Season 2 10 out of 10 stars. Yes. And, you know, the whole show, 10 out of 10 stars. And as I did when I reviewed Season 1, everything about the Santa Clauses, you know, both Seasons 1 and 2 were really good. And again, a lot of people have said, you know, Season 2 was better than Season 1, and I won't argue and I won't deny, because it was really good, Season 2, but still, Season 1 I don't think was god-awful. It did have a rough/bad start, but sure enough, when Season 2 happened, things got better for sure. And what about you guys? What did you think of Season 2 of the Santa Clauses itself? Like, did you enjoy the storytelling and what was going on in Season 2? Just everything of Season 2. Yeah, what did you think? And what did you think of my review? Leave comments and give this review video a like, as always. And with all that being said, reviewing Christmassy materials on the weekends has come to a close. It's been a lot of fun reviewing what I reviewed on the weekends that was all Christmassy, and the same goes for the weekdays. Everything that I've reviewed, you know, because I think I picked out some pretty good Christmassy films/materials to review for this Christmas/this December. And I look forward to next December/next Christmas for what I have in store and what I'm going to be reviewing next. Yeah, can't wait. So with all that being said, thank you very much for watching. I hope you guys enjoyed my review of Season 2 of the Santa Clauses. More review videos coming your way next year. They're going to be awesome. Keep looking forward, and I'll see you guys in the next video/review. take care, and hopefully, until Season 3 of The Santa Clauses, peace out, and for one last time, Happy Holidays / Merry Christmas / Happy New Year to you all.